My boyfriend, Van, 33M, and I, 24F, have been dating for the past 3 years. We met over Bumble, and after going out on a few dates, we knew we had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Despite the significant age gap, our connection felt effortless. We bonded over our love for travel and adventure. From the very beginning of our relationship, I always made it very clear to Van that I was not ready to settle down anytime soon. I cherished our adventures and the freedom to explore life without the commitment of marriage. Van always seemed understanding, assuring me that he valued our relationship and was in no rush for anything more. 3 months ago, Van and I attended his friend's wedding. I met some of his college friends, and amidst the celebration, a few of them playfully teased us, wondering why we weren't married yet. I chuckled nervously, brushing off the question with a shy smile. After returning from the wedding, Van's behavior took an unexpected turn. He began flooding me with social media posts that emphasized the importance of women getting married and having children before the age of 30. Initially, I found it a bit peculiar but didn't think much of it. However, his behavior escalated. He started asking his sister if we could babysit her kids on the weekends. Being a working professional, weekends were my time to unwind and enjoy some relaxation. Initially, I didn't mind having the kids over occasionally, but it soon became a regular occurrence, and I began feeling uneasy about the whole situation. What annoyed me the most was how he would volunteer to babysit his sister's kids without even consulting me. I would make plans, even securing reservations for us to go out during the weekend, only for him to cancel them, citing the need to watch his sister's kids because she needed a break. I began to suspect that he was doing this intentionally, perhaps in his weird little way to prepare me for the future. What irked me even more was that every time we babysat those kids, I ended up being the one looking after them, while Van remained glued to the TV with them for the entire day. The situation not only disrupted my plans to relax but also left me feeling like I was shouldering the majority of the responsibility during these babysitting sessions. When I realized that he wasn't going to stop this charade, I started to make plans to hang out with my friends without him. This really seemed to piss him off. He insisted that as a woman I should be looking after the kids and leave him alone with them. I told him that he was the one who was inviting them over every time without asking me, hence they were completely his responsibility. He started to protest if this was how I was going to treat our children one day. I was shocked to hear such a disgusting comment from him out of nowhere. I angrily reminded him that his sister's kids were not mine to look after, so he couldn't force me to babysit them when all he did was drink beer and burp on the couch. I went on to tell him that I was neither looking to settle down nor was I looking to have children anytime soon. He later apologized to me for how he had spoken to me, and I thought he had finally learned his lessons. Over the next few weeks, he didn't bring up the matter and we had a few great dates. Then, out of nowhere, when we were out on a date, I caught him staring at a family sitting nearby. He then turned to look at me and started to talk about how my biological clock was ticking already and we should get pregnant as soon as we can. His words started to scare me as I realized he was no longer playing around. Despite me saying I wasn't ready, it seemed like Van wasn't listening. He was getting more and more obsessed with the idea of getting married. The pressure was getting too much, and I knew I had to talk about it before it messed up our relationship. One evening, after spending the day preparing a grand meal for us, I decided to have a more open conversation regarding this so I could understand where he was coming from. As we sat down to eat, the aroma of the food couldn't mask the tension that lingered in the air. I took a deep breath, gathered my thoughts, and finally broached the subject. I looked at Van, my fork pausing mid-air, and said, "Van, we need to talk about something important." His eyes met mine, and I could sense a mix of anticipation and unease. I began by expressing my feelings about marriage and how, at this point in my life being just 24 years old, I wasn't ready for such a commitment. I explained that I valued our relationship immensely but needed time to grow individually before taking such a significant step. I told him that I did not want to be married for at least the next 4 years. Van, however, seemed taken aback. He tried to convince me with tales of happily married couples, the joy of raising children, and the security that a marriage could offer. His arguments were heartfelt, but I knew that they didn't align with the priorities I had set for myself. As he continued to make his case, I stood my ground, emphasizing my desire for personal growth. I made it clear that I was not ready for marriage, let alone getting pregnant at such a young age. It became a challenging conversation, with both of us expressing our perspectives passionately. Despite Van's attempts to sway my opinion, I remained firm in my stance. I explained that rushing into marriage wouldn't be fair to either of us and might jeopardize the very relationship we cherished. Hearing his continuous argument and feeling the weight of our differences, I took a deep breath and told Van that if my reluctance to marry were a deal breaker for him, perhaps it would be best for us to part ways. I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. Van began to protest vehemently, his earlier conviction momentarily wavering. He backtracked, assuring me that our relationship meant more to him than any societal expectations or predefined timelines. He claimed that he just needed time to adjust his own perspective. He assured me that he would respect my choices from now on and give our relationship the space it needed to thrive. Although I wasn't fully convinced, I did observe the sincerity in his eyes. His reassurances held a promise that he had grasped the essence of my feelings and that the topic of marriage wouldn't loom over us like a storm cloud any longer. With a reluctant yet hopeful nod, I agreed, thinking that I would not have to worry about this again. After our serious chat, things chilled out. Van stopped bugging me about getting hitched, and we got back to our cool, adventure-filled groove. We continued to hike, explore, and enjoy life without any pressure. It felt like we had found our sweet spot again. My sister's birthday was coming up in a few weeks. I was delighted to be flying back home and meeting my family after a long time. On the days leading up to her birthday, I noticed that Van spent an unusual time on his phone. He would act a bit odd every time I walked into the room, and it made me wonder what was going on. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but the uneasy feeling lingered, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I couldn't shake the thought that something was going on with him. When we flew back to my hometown for my sister's birthday, Van's behavior became even more perplexing. He seemed overly invested in the preparations for her upcoming party, constantly checking his phone and excusing himself for mysterious calls. On the day of her birthday party, I was thoroughly enjoying myself. I was catching up with my family, chatting with friends, savoring the delicious food, and soaking in the festive atmosphere. Laughter and music filled the air, creating a joyous backdrop to the celebration. Amidst the lively chatter and celebration, Van decided to call everyone's attention by clinking his glass. His voice cut through the merriment, and a hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned toward him. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sense of unease settling in as I tried to comprehend what he was trying to do. Van began talking about how his life had changed since the day he met me. He smiled and started describing how he never thought he would settle down until he met me. I was bewildered and confused about what he was doing. He walked up to me and suddenly got down on one knee. I gasped in shock as my family and friends erupted in a chorus of encouragement, cheering him on as he took out a ring. He continued to say how he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with me and eventually start a family. Van's eyes held a mixture of anticipation and hope, as he continued to hold out the ring awaiting my response. I was so shocked seeing what he had just done. He knew very well how much I didn't want to get married, but there he was, a shiny ring in hand, asking me to say yes in front of everyone. In that charged moment, I grappled with conflicting emotions. The festive celebration had taken an unexpected turn, and I found myself standing at the center of attention. Panic set in. I looked around at all the familiar faces. My mother looked like I had just won the lottery. My sister smiled at me, mouthing me to say yes to Van, and all my cousins were giggling. I felt like a deer caught in headlights. My boyfriend had this hopeful look in his eyes like he just aced a math test and was waiting for a high five. In the midst of my internal freakout, I shook my head. "I can't," I finally uttered, the weight of those two words hanging in the air. Van's hopeful expression faltered, replaced by a mix of sadness and confusion. His disappointment was palpable, and I could sense a tinge of embarrassment in the silence that followed. My family members exchanged glances, their initial enthusiasm replaced by a hesitant awareness of the unfolding scene. Van stood up slowly, the glimmer of the ring now dimmed. He attempted a strained smile, attempting to downplay the rejection. The atmosphere, once vibrant, now carried an awkward tension. I felt a mix of emotions: regret for causing discomfort, and anger towards Van for putting me through this publicly. I announced to everyone that I needed to talk to Van in private. Frustration gripped me as I led him inside, away from the prying eyes of the guests in the backyard. As soon as the door closed behind us, I erupted in anger. I couldn't believe the audacity he had to pull a public proposal to pressure me into saying yes when he clearly knew that I wasn't looking to settle down anytime soon. Hearing my words, tears welled up in his eyes. His voice quivered as he expressed how I had shattered his dreams, claiming that proposing was the ultimate expression of his love and any other woman would have been excited to say yes to him. I angrily retorted that he should then go and propose to someone else because I can't be with him anymore. The scene quickly escalated, with Van's tears turning into audible sobs. He started to accuse me that I had led him on all these years, playing with his emotions. I reminded him about our past conversation and how I never signed up for this emotional roller coaster, so I didn't understand how I was suddenly the bad guy. The commotion caught the attention of my sister and mother, who rushed in with concern etched on their faces. Seeing his tear-stricken face, they started to implore me to reconsider his proposal, highlighting how it was time for me to grow up and settle down. I couldn't believe how my own family could force me to get married when I had already clearly expressed that I was not ready. My sister told me that I had no right to embarrass Van in front of everyone. I looked around and saw some of my friends giving me sympathetic glances, thinking I was crushing my poor Van's dreams. Overwhelmed by the embarrassment and the persistent opposition from my family, I couldn't bear the weight of the situation. I quietly walked out of the party, leaving Van to continue his emotional display in front of everyone. Since the incident, the atmosphere at home remains charged. Van, overwhelmed by embarrassment and the aftermath of his heartfelt proposal gone awry, decided to fly back alone. I was a bit relieved as I knew that we needed space at this moment. Even though he is gone, the awkwardness continues to linger, with my family questioning my decision and attempting to sway me toward reconsidering his proposal. Despite sticking to my guns about not wanting to get hitched, I find myself grappling with guilt. The image of Van's sad face keeps replaying in my mind. Did I break his heart? Maybe. But at least I didn't break my own in the process. So Reddit, am I the asshole for rejecting my boyfriend's proposal after clearly letting him know that I was not interested in marriage now? Update 1. In the aftermath, since I wrote this story, a lot has happened in my family. My sister, Donna, and I have had a fighting match regarding what happened between me and Van. She revealed how Van had confided in her about his elaborate plan to propose, and she had known about this for weeks. In her mind, she believed it would be a wonderful surprise for her birthday celebration. The disappointment on her face was evident as she expressed how my rejection and my selfish nature had cast a shadow over what should have been otherwise a joyous occasion for everyone to celebrate. My mother tried to keep the peace between us, but I couldn't take my sister's accusations anymore. Amidst our heated exchange, I finally confessed to them that Van and I have had multiple conversations about marriage. I emphasized that I had consistently communicated my reluctance to tie the knot so soon. Hearing this, my sister's expression shifted from anger to a mix of frustration and confusion. She asked me to elaborate more, and I told her how I had communicated my priorities to Van clearly, and Van had promised me that he would not be pressuring me to get married anymore. I asked her if Van had told her about our conversation, and she shook her head no. It was clear that my sister had been unaware that I had expressed my feelings to Van long before he decided to publicly propose to me. Donna then questioned me why would Van purposefully propose to me if he knew that I wasn't going to get married. I explained to her that despite our conversations, Van somehow might have thought that a grand gesture would somehow change my mind. It was as if he believed the public nature of the proposal could override the doubts I had expressed about settling down so soon. My dad, who was hearing our conversation, decided to speak up at this moment. He generally doesn't like to interfere in family matters and detests being around any drama. I braced myself thinking that he was going to reprimand me also like my sister was, but to my surprise, my dad told Donna to leave me alone. No one should feel forced into marriage, he remarked, his tone reflecting a stern yet understanding demeanor. If Van truly cared about her, he would not have pressured her so publicly. Love should grow naturally, not be coerced with grand gestures and unnecessary drama. His words resonated in the room, causing a brief pause in the conversation. Donna, visibly conflicted, seemed to absorb the gravity of my dad's perspective. I couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and bewilderment towards my dad for having my back. Despite my sister temporarily shelving the conversation, there's an underlying skepticism lingering in the air. As for Van, he has been calling me nonstop after flying back home. I thought we could take a bit of space from each other, but he has been constantly texting how much he loves me and misses me. He has sent me paragraph after paragraph about how he can't imagine spending the rest of his life with anyone except me. It's starting to make me feel suffocated. I have loved Van all these years, but his refusal to accept my boundaries is making me question our relationship. I will update you once I fly back home and confront him. Update 2. Thank you for everyone's overwhelming support and interest in my story. To start with, when I returned back to the city, I didn't immediately go back home as I knew Van would be waiting for me. His constant calls and heartfelt messages had overwhelmed me, and I didn't have the energy to confront him. I decided to stay at a nearby hotel for a few days while I went to work. Despite my initial resolve to address the situation calmly, his relentless pursuit became overwhelming. 2 weeks later, I decided it was time for a face-to-face confrontation. I invited Van out for lunch, and he was excited to see me after so long. As I met him, the weight of unspoken words hung in the air. His eyes pleaded for reconciliation, but I knew deep down that our paths had diverged irreversibly. In a quiet corner of the restaurant, we laid bare our feelings. I recounted how the public proposal, despite his good intentions, had become an unforgivable moment. I conveyed the embarrassment and discomfort that lingered in the aftermath, emphasizing the strain it had put on relationships within my family. His eyes mirrored a mix of regret and realization hearing my words. He then started to protest, insisting that everyone would forget about this incident once we got married. I sighed in exasperation, looking him in the eyes, and firmly conveyed that I didn't want to be with him anymore. His eyes grew wide in shock as I continued to explain that I didn't want to be married to someone who would knowingly force me into a corner publicly. I stressed the importance of respecting each other's boundaries and choices, emphasizing that genuine love should be considerate and patient. He started to profess his love again, narrating how he wanted to grow old with me. Yet, I stood firm, reiterating that we clearly wanted different things in life and I was not going to change myself for him. Emotions ran high, tears flowed, and Van continued to plead. I empathized with his heartbreak but stood resolute, unwilling to compromise my own priorities. His initial shock started to turn into resentment, and his frustration began bubbling to the surface. He began to accuse me of holding him back, even using derogatory words like gold digger. He argued that all his friends were settling down, building families, and here he was, trying to convince me to get married. He told me how he was the best thing to ever happen to me and I was a foolish girl if I decided to let him go. His words were laced with so much bitterness and desperation that I couldn't help but laugh, which stopped him mid-track. His claim of being the best thing to ever happen to me struck me as ironic, considering the emotional turmoil his grand proposal had caused to me the last few weeks. I told him that I had been feeling guilty a few days ago for rejecting his proposal, but watching his reaction had solidified the fact that I was right not to marry him. Van, caught off guard by my response, seemed momentarily lost for words. I could see the realization dawning on him, even if reluctantly, that I was not going to listen to his demands. With a heavy sigh, I wished him luck for his future and told him to not bother me ever again. I also let him know that I would be coming by the next day to pick up my things from our place so I could officially move out. Van reluctantly agreed, a mix of resentment and acceptance etched on his face. As we parted ways, I couldn't help but feel proud of myself for standing up for what I wanted. It wasn't about relishing in his disappointment. Instead, it was the importance of standing up for what I truly wanted, even if it meant disappointing someone else. Update 3, it's been about 4 months since I broke up with Van. My life has been going surprisingly well. After our breakup, I moved out from his place into a flat where I lived with a great roommate. It has been a bit daunting to adjust to a new space, but the clarity of newfound independence offered a glimmer of hope. It felt like shedding a weight I didn't realize I was carrying while dating Van. In the days that followed, I faced my fair share of questions and raised eyebrows from my family. My sister, Donna, initially struggled to accept the situation, still holding on to the notion that I had let go of something good. Aware of the lingering concerns, I decided to invite Donna to visit me at my new place. The intention was to spend some one-on-one time with her, giving us the chance to have a heartfelt conversation, without the prying ears of our family members. When she visited me, we could finally talk about everything. I started by acknowledging her concerns, understanding that my decisions might have seemed sudden and unexpected to everyone as I had been with Van for a long time. I wanted to reassure her that my breakup with him wasn't about rejecting a good thing but about recognizing what truly made me happy. We delved into the dynamics of my relationship with Van, the pressures that had been building, and how his grand proposal had become the tipping point that eventually forced me to break up with him. Donna, with a mix of curiosity and concern, asked about my emotional state during and after the breakup. I explained the relief that came with shedding the expectations that didn't align with my desires. We shared a few laughs about the awkwardness of the proposal incident, finding some humor in the chaos. The conversation then shifted to the positive changes in my life post-breakup. I highlighted the freedom I had now to make decisions in my life without the constant worry and pressure of what my partner would want and how I had been rediscovering myself. Donna listened, starting to understand my perspective. In the end, she assured me that if this was something that made me happy, then she didn't want to stand in my way. I felt relieved hearing her words. Our talk then transitioned from the heavy topics to more lighthearted banter. Over the course of her stay with me, we had a great time and I took her around the city for sightseeing. Since my sister's visit, my mother has also started to see that I have been doing much better without Van. She has apologized to me over time for judging me that day and has assured me that I have the autonomy to decide when and if I ever want to get married. She emphasized that my happiness and well-being were her primary concerns and she would stand by my decision no matter what. Life has taken a turn for the better. The weekends are now mine to relax and enjoy without the stress of babysitting or unexpected marital discussions. I have rekindled old hobbies, taken spontaneous trips with strangers, and found solace in the simplicity of being true to myself. As I reflect on these 4 months, I can't help but smile at the progress I have made. The breakup, once a source of guilt, has now become a pivotal point in my journey of self-discovery. I am forging ahead, embracing life on my terms, and relishing the freedom to grow at my own pace. My life isn't perfect, but it's filled with moments of contentment, laughter, and the simple joy of being free to write my own story.